Mr. Chairman. Indiana has a large presence of juvenile product manufacturers in the state that make everything from strollers to car seats, and I've heard firsthand about the challenges that they face with regards to redundant testing requirements that might do nothing to advance safety while siphoning away money that could have been spent on R&D in these companies' innovation and resources like additional employment. And one Hoosier manufacturer told me recently that Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act was passed. Since it's passed, they've spent $12.5 million in testing costs alone. And that's because they not only have to test every platform that the products are on, but every SKU as well. So not only do they spend an average of $8,900 to test every new stroller or cradle design, but they have to spend an extra $1,000 to test every paint, every new paint color as well. And so I think we all agree that the safety of our children is of utmost importance and shouldn't be compromised. However, I think we have to draw the right balance and to ensure that the companies have the needed resources to do further R&D to ensure their products are safer. And so, Mr. Chairman, I have a question to you that with this in mind, what actions have you taken in the past year to provide relief to companies with respect to these costs of these third-party testing requirements?
Thank you, Congresswoman. One of the areas that we found really interesting, and this has been discovered by our Small Business Ombudsman, and I don't want to get Commissioner Mohorovic upset since it involves his prior occupation, but we have found that a lot of the third-party labs are testing for services that are not required. And so our Small Business Ombudsman and his office provide phenomenal support and assistance working with small businesses, and I would encourage any of the members who have small businesses in particular that have issues to reach out to Neil Cohen of the CPSC, because he can work with companies to go through their testing reports and to find out whether or not they really need certain testing. Now, he doesn't actually go line by line, but what he says is, here are some general guidances, and here are some questions that you should be asked. He really does a phenomenal job of empowering a lot of companies, and I think that's gone a huge way to addressing some of these issues.
Thank you. Commissioner Moravec.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I think what you'll get is a lot of the dodging tactics from the agency to try to explain why we haven't achieved much in terms of measurable outcomes and reducing the cost and burden of third-party testing. We have all of the resources we need. We have the legal authority. We just lack the will to be able to enact very many of the policies and suggestions that have come before the agency. So we can blame the testing labs. We can blame retailers for retail protocols. We can dodge and weave on this as long as we want. But as I said earlier, it's frustrating for me particularly because it lacks alignment. It's so inconsistent with established CPSC policy. If we applied the same appreciation for risk tolerance that we did in the promulgation of the component part testing rule, we would have all of the emphasis, and staff would be able to recommend countless means to reduce the cost and burden without any adverse health or safety impact.
Thank you. Chairman Kaye, it's my understanding that $1 million of your 2015 budget was to be allocated to reducing the needless and duplicative testing burdens. Can you explain what actions you've actually taken in leading the Commission to fulfill that role? How have you reached out? What do companies expect to see from this relief if we have, mandated that in your budget?
Sure, and one of the limitations, and I agree with Commissioner Mohorovic that we do have a lot of what we need, but we don't have everything that we need. But one of the areas is that it's a one-time appropriation, which means we cannot staff up from it. We can't count on, it's not prudent to hire a bunch of people without knowing how you're going to pay for them in following fiscal years. So most of this money has gone through contracting. So we contract out with organizations who can do a lot of the technical work to figure out if there is possibility for relief. But ultimately, our staff has to take that work. There has to be resources internally to be able to turn that work around and to try to make it something actionable. And so the three areas that I mentioned in response to Congresswoman Blackburn's questions have to do with providing this exact type of relief, looking, for instance, at natural wood and whether or not if you use a natural wood alone, you have to test for certain heavy metals that are required by law. We keep trying to check off lists of materials and types of products that you don't actually have to test to avoid these costs. And that has been the theme, both in terms of stakeholder engagement and internal deliberations that we're trying to pursue to make it worth the while.
Thank you. My time is up. I yield back.